Hello there. ISO 27001 information security feels complicated for most organizations, but it doesn't have to be. And in today's video, I'll show you the same step-by-step roadmap I use to help organizations to achieve ISO 27001 certification in an efficient and a cost-effective manner. My name is Syed Arshad Hashmi. With 30 years experience into this field of international standards and certifications, I'm working with Core System Consultant, where we help business achieve ISO certifications, IT governance, and cybersecurity. And today I will break it all down into a practical, easy to follow sequence that you can apply immediately, whether you're a small or a large organization. So let's get started. So this video is a series of the ISO 27001 Information Security Management System standard that I've been doing for some time. And you can watch my previous videos as well, to which I'll give the link in the description below. So I'll be focusing in this video about the implementation and most importantly, what should be the sequence of that implementation so that you can acquire the ISO 27001 certification at your own organization at your own pace. So let's get started. And just to give a brief overview about the 27001 standard, so which I've covered in detail in my previous videos, that ISO 27001 is a set of requirements which are defined in 4 till 10 clauses. And then there are certain controls which are defined in Annex A. Those controls are called information security best practices, which are total 93 controls that are defined in the Annex A. So you can understand the 27001 standard in two parts. One part talks about the requirements where the information security management system is established, and the other part talks about the controls which you need to implement at your organization, which you need to select and implement as per the scenario, as per that applies to your particular nature of business. So let's get started. And the first step that you need to do while starting the project is the define the focal person or the team that is going to work on the ISO 27001 information security standard. So that has to be a dedicated resource, but can be an employee from the company depending upon the structure of your organization, or you can have a dedicated resource to work on that 27001 standard. The key step is the training of that resource or the focal person of the team that you are assigning to do that project. So the training is the key so that they get the awareness that what 27001 is all about, what are the information security concepts, how's the structure of the standard, and how it is related to your particular organization, for that matter, to your particular business. That is the key to start the project, that your focal person or the dedicated resource should be trained on the ISO 27001 standard. That leads to the first step when you start implementing the project, which is to define the scope. Now, scope means that which part or which number of processes or which product lines you are taking for ISO 27001 certification. So there's a lot of flexibility in 27001 vis-a-vis the scope of certification. You can take number of departments, number of processes, number of services that you are delivering, or any product line for that matter for certification. So you need to define the scope as well as the nature of the business that you are in, and that's purely the management decision which part you are initially taking for the ISO 27001 certification. Once you determine the scope, then the first step, the third step, is to perform the gap assessment. The gap assessment for that particular scope means that a person with enough knowledge about the 27001 standard will evaluate the gap between your company current practices and the requirements of the standard. So that will give you an idea that how far you are away from the requirements of the standard. And my preference is that that one particular activity should be done by an experienced ISMS information security auditor or a consultant, but it's not really required. Your person, the focal person, if he or she may have the enough knowledge about the 27001 standard, they themselves can do a gap assessment to evaluate the company current status versus the requirements of the standard. That leads to the fourth step, which is the major step, which is to perform the information security risk assessment. So the key to the whole information security management system, or the foundation, is the risk assessment to the information security. So what are the risks? What are the threats? What are the vulnerabilities currently present at my organization? That needs to be evaluated, and that would be the foundation for the whole security posture at your organization. So whatever the investments that you are going to make at your organization, that will basically be based on what type of risks are there, as well as the nature of business that you have, and what are the threats and what are the risk levels present currently at your organization, or what are the vulnerabilities present at your organization. That will all depend upon the information security risk assessment. And that is one of the activities where I would strongly recommend to involve the head of the processes, whichever the other processes within the scope of certification, or the head of the department, to take them on board while you are doing that risk assessment process. That point, once you're done with the risk assessment, then you will be coming up to know that what are the loopholes at your organization, what are the open areas, what are the high risk areas. And that is the point where you need to refer the Annex A, the 93 best security practices. But you are not limited to those 93 security best practices. You can adopt beyond those 93 security best practices. So whatever those controls that is defined by the standard, you may select any of the controls which covers few domains like human resource domains, organizational domains, technology domain, and physical security domain. So they define the all the 93 security best practices within those four domains. So you need to you need to select the best controls that applies to your organization, whether it's the nature of business that you're in, and whether it's the risk assessment report that you will get, which are the high risk areas. And while you are so when you are starting to implement those controls, that control implementation may include the development of the ISMS documentation as well, which can include the policies and the procedures, the software security, network security, incident management, access control policies, database management, cloud operations, supplier management, business continuity management, disaster recovery planning, legal compliance obligations. So all those documentation regarding the ISMS that is required can be done at that point when you are implementing those controls. And that control implementation will generate a document which is called risk treatment plan. So when you are implementing those controls, and when you end up the risk assessment, and when you're working on those controls, or when you are selecting those controls, that will end up at a document which is a requirement of the standard 6.1.3, which is the development of the risk treatment plan. So the risk treatment basically state which controls you have adopted, and how long you're going to take for that implementation, who's responsible, and the whole roadmap, how to implement those controls, and what are the timelines. So that will really give you quite a picture that where do you stand and how much far away you are from the next milestone. Now, that is also the point where you should start training your workforce within the scope of certification. So, whichever people that are involved, they should know what the activities are going on, what is information security, the basic concepts, and why it is essential for the organization, and how they are playing a part by complying with the security policies and procedures. So, that is a real point when the people should be taken on board and the whole workforce should be taken on board with the information security drive that is going on at the organization. That leads to the next step, which is about the internal auditing. So you can train internal auditors, and that can perform an internal audit. That's a requirement of the standard to evaluate the status of implementation. So before calling the external auditors, the standard requires that the company internal audit process should evaluate the current status of implementation and resolve any deficiencies, any non-conformities, or any deviations still present at the organization level, so that when the external auditor may come, those may have been resolved. So that internal auditing is a requirement, and this can be done after the training of the workforce. That's the best point, because now the workforce knows what they are supposed to do and they will be following those practices. And then you conduct the internal audit, followed by another milestone, which is called a management review. So a management review is another requirement of the standard in which the performance of the whole information security management system and the status of implementation and all the other elements, these are well defined in the clause 9.3 of the standard. That needs to be reviewed by the management, and to evaluate the current status of compliance and what is the way forward. At that point, or like in parallel to when you are working on the findings of the internal audit, you can start contacting the certification body. The certification body will take their own time to manage the external auditors that is to come to audit your organization for the certification audit. And this whole process of the certification for the ISO 27001 is the same as for any other ISO standard, which I have covered in detail in one of my previous video. And you can click on that and you will go through the whole detail of the stage 1 and stage 2 audit. And that is the most cost effective and efficient manner if you follow these steps to implement the ISO 27001 at your organization and acquire ISO 27001 certification. So I hope that this short video may have given you the key steps how to go about this 27001 project. It's really not that difficult as it sounds and initially may seem. Once you start following these steps in this particular sequence, because these are logical steps and proven steps, because one step output is the input to the next step. So they are logically connected with each other. So I would strongly recommend. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to place a document which you can download with all these steps for your quick reference. And hopefully in my next video, I may cover a topic regarding the common mistakes that you should avoid when you are implementing the 27001 standard. So that probably will give you some further insight about this implementation process. Till then, I thank you very much for staying with me and watching the video. Thank you.